Hi everyone, my name is Fatima, and you are listening to a special live episode of Paper Cut, a podcast about books and reading from the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. As you can hear from the total chaos that surrounds me, I'm actually coming to you live from the Emirates Literature Festival in Dubai. It's the 12th edition of the Emirates Literature Festival. It's sponsored by Emirates Airlines primarily, and a whole host of other sponsors. And honestly, every year they really bring it home. Actually, this is the second time I've been able to attend, and it's the second time I've been blown away, to be honest. There are such a huge range of writers and not just writers, but people who work in the world of literature and the world of publishing. There are events like, obviously discussions, one-on-one discussions with authors of books that have been published recently, as well as panel discussions that cover, with a variety of authors that cover themes that are common between these writers, and as well as workshops on writing and how to find a publisher, how to find an agent, and competitions on short story writing, and just like poetry readings. And it's really where you want to be if you're in the Gulf region and you want to have a real literary experience in the region. I'm really happy to be here, having seen 3 amazing women writers by complete coincidence. I obviously wish I could go to as many events as possible, although I learned my lesson from my last event where I booked back-to-back events, and that really didn't go down well. So this time I had to be very picky and choose only authors that I have read and I'm really excited about. So, and that was a hard decision to make as well, because there was still a lot of overlap. But I ended up, so I'm just going to give you a quick recap of what happened today. First writer I saw was probably, it's really hard to pick a favorite, but she was amazing. Esi Edugyan, who wrote Washington Black, which was shortlisted for many prizes. And she talked about the process of writing Washington Black, and the moderator led her through a very interesting series of questions, and we had a very nice round of questions as well from the audience. And it was really interesting to see her process in researching the book, because as I discovered through her discussion, this was actually a heavily researched piece of writing, and it really took a huge toll on her emotionally as well as mentally because of the subject matter of the book. She wanted to portray as realistic an example of the brutality that is inflicted upon enslaved people in the Caribbean region specifically, and so had to carry out a lot of research to be able to be as accurate as possible without being gratuitous. The other thing that she talked about was the very special amount of focus that she placed on developing the voices of each character. As a result of this discussion, I went straight out to the little bookshop outside of the festival and picked up a copy of Half-Blood Blues, and I'm definitely going to be reading it right after the next one that I'm currently reading. She is a fantastic speaker, and I highly recommend anyone go pick up a copy of her book Washington Black. I hear Half-Blood Blues is amazing, but I'll obviously wait until I actually read it to let you know my opinion. And next up was Fatima Bhutto. Now that was a really interesting discussion, because although I hadn't read her book before, I am very much aware of who Fatima Bhutto is. I've read her writings, her pieces in media, and I'm aware of her sort of political stance and where she stands in this political dynasty of the Bhutto family. And obviously the topic of her book was very interesting as well. It's called New Kings of the World, Dispatches from Bollywood, Disney, and K-pop, where she goes into detail about the rise of the cultural scene from Asia, and specifically focusing on Bollywood, as in the Indian cinema industry, and K-pop, which is the South Korean music industry, Disney, which is the Turkish soap opera industry, and the consumers of those culture, which are not usually where you would imagine them to be. So, for example, when she was talking about Bollywood as a global phenomenon, she focused on the consumers of that particular type of culture from Peru. So she found a huge subculture of Bollywood fans in Peru, and they're quite fervent fans of Bollywood over there. So she traveled to Lima and met these fandoms and had interviews with them and researched with them, and so on and so forth. And it was her. What I loved about her discussion the most was that she has a very keen insight on what culture is as a tool and as a mechanism for spreading a certain ideology and things like that. And she started off with a bang. She said something which I thought was really interesting, which is that culture is a weapon, and those who know how to use it will be using it as such. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she said. That really was a striking thing to start off with, and talking about how most people go into consuming culture quite innocently, thinking that they are going to watch a movie because they want to be entertained, and likewise for going to a concert or watching a TV show and things like that. And but in reality, the people who produce that piece of work don't necessarily view it as such a benign piece of just art and slash entertainment. They're viewing it as a medium by which they can spread a certain message. She gave the example of the messages that were being sent out using Bollywood films, starting from the 50s, right after partition, and all the way up to the 90s, and the way in which the trend of main characters and protagonists in the films from the 50s to the 90s shifts pretty drastically from the underdog who believes in freedom and justice to capitalist hedge fund globetrotting jet setters, basically. And that's reflective of the political ideology of the state and how that infiltrates into popular culture. I can't wait to read more of what she's written. Next up was, of course, Jokha al-Harthi. Obviously, last but not least. Jokha al-Harthi gave her this interview in Arabic. So it was my first time listening to an Arabic interview live. She talked about her process in researching, saying that she relied mainly on oral history as a resource. So stories passed down from families, members of her community in Oman. But as is the case in a lot of other Arab countries, resources are really hard to find regionally. And so she ended up relying a lot on her university library for resources and her university was Edinburgh, where she was doing her PhD, as well as the British Library in London, which is obviously a trove for that kind of material. I was really, really happy to see her talk live. I've never seen her speak before. And basically that was it for day number 1. I am pretty exhausted, so tomorrow is going to be even busier with 4 events rather than 3. There is utter chaos over here because there are a lot of children's book authors, and I had no idea just how popular children's book authors are. Like, they put the adult fandom to shame because the children's the line for the authors, children's book authors who were signing books was like literally 3 times as long as any other line. It was pretty insane. So it's really cool and encouraging to see that. Makes me so happy to know that there are parents that are really encouraging their kids to come and that the kids are responding so positively. I really, 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 really hope that next year I'll be here with my son standing in line to get a book signed for him. Let's see. One can only hope. Anyways, this is Fatima signing off from Emirates Literature Festival, day 1. It's been a spectacular first day for me, and tomorrow has big shoes to fill. Until then, happy reading.